good. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm Justin Borgman. I'm co-founder and CEO of Starburst, and I'm incredibly excited to be joined by Richard Jarvis, Chief Technology Officer at Emiss Health, and you're going to learn a lot about Emiss Health today. If you'd like to learn more about Starburst, we have a booth in the exhibitor hall right when you come in. Please come and visit us. If you want to learn more about fast analytics for a data lake, or you'd like to learn more about a data mesh, we have a local celebrity at the booth we call Captain Mesh, who knows everything about building a data mesh that you could possibly want. Also, you may notice I have a funny accent, and it is true. I am from America, and this is actually my first trip in about a year and a half, which I feel like I could do this entire keynote on that event, because that is such a big deal to actually be here with you in person. I'm really, really excited to be here. So with that, let me kick things off and dive in and see if we can go here. I'll start with a shared purpose, a purpose that both Emiss and Starburst have in common, which is this idea of freeing our customers to see the invisible and achieve the impossible. And what we mean by that is providing access to data that was never available before. And what kinds of new analytics can you do by bringing that data into your analytical process? The way we do that is we turn data warehousing inside out. I like to say we're a database without storage. We do data warehousing analytics without the data warehouse. So if you were here earlier this morning for Benoit's keynote from Snowflake, that's traditional data warehousing, right? You take data from a variety of different data sources, you create pipelines, you go through an ETL process, and you ultimately load them into one central place, which becomes your single source of truth. But in practice, that's actually quite difficult. In fact, I would argue maybe even impossible, because you're always creating new data in a variety of different data sources. And essentially what Starburst does is it flips that around. We allow you to do analytics on the data where it lives. So that could be in a data lake, it could be in a data warehouse, it could be in MongoDB, it could be in Exasol, it could be Oracle, it could be Teradata, it could be Vertica, it could be most of the vendors that you see out there in the hall today. And that's the big idea of kind of what Starburst does. But again, today's presentation is not really about Starburst. I want to talk a little bit about setting the stage here for Richard and his talk. We recently did a survey with about 400 data leaders. And what we learned is that 53% of data practitioners, data leaders, since the onset of COVID, have said that they need greater need for access to data than ever before. And in addition to that, 52% of respondents said they have data in 5 or more data platforms. So back to that earlier point about the challenges of centralizing, the reality is your data is decentralized today, whether you like it or not, and 52% have 5 or more data platforms within their enterprise. And lastly, 39% of business leaders said that decisions require latency of less than a second. They need fast access to this data. They need the fastest, shortest possible time to insight in order to do the work that they need to do, particularly in a rapidly evolving economic environment and so forth. So to talk more about the path to near real-time analytics at scale, and particularly in the context of this pandemic that we've been working on, I'm excited to hand this over to Richard, who can share a bit about how they re-architected their approach to their platform, EMIS-X Analytics, and the outcomes that they've delivered, and what that's done for many of us here in the UK. So Richard, over to you. Oh, is the audio working for? Okay.
Hopefully you can hear me now, otherwise I'll be shouting out to you all today. So many of you won't have heard of Emiss Group, so I'm going to start with just a bit of an explanation of who we are and how we probably touch many of your lives today, even though few don't realise it. Emiss is a software vendor for healthcare systems. We service about 60% of all the GPs in the country, providing them with software that allows them to record your medical record, to look at your appointments, understand your allergies and medications, and basically ensure that their patients are well. But it's not just primary care, the doctors that we work with. We work with pharmacies. We have one of the leading patient apps that you can get on the App Store to look at your own medications, your medical record, and make appointments with specialists. We have community pharmacy, so if you go into a pharmacy in the UK, there's a good chance that your medication is managed through one of our systems. And we have emergency care systems where when you go into a hospital and you present for triage, our software is recording that information into a database so that you can be treated quickly and safely. You can imagine that across all those different domains, with all these people being treated, even before a pandemic hits, we collect an enormous quantity of data that is both sensitive, important to patient lives, and needing to be accessed by a variety of different people at the right time, in real time. Now, happily, we began our journey to building a data mesh way before COVID, well, 6 months before COVID, with the plan of enabling analytics for healthcare researchers in a trusted and safe way. Obviously, patient information is incredibly sensitive, and our customers expect us to handle that data securely. But they also understand that without research into medical conditions, the health of the UK and the wider world can't be improved. So we'd started with this big data warehouse before COVID hit, and then all of a sudden in March 2020, we got some phone calls saying we really need some insight into COVID and how patients are being affected. So if we just go on to the next slide, what we've built in our data mesh is a mixture of a data lake in the cloud, dashboards and AI that allow us to interpret the data that's stored in that data lake and make it consumable for people who maybe aren't data scientists, maybe they're healthcare researchers or GPs or pharmacists. We have a concept which is familiar to those of you in the healthcare world called trusted research environments, which is an environment in which you can use data without extracting it and to derive insight or build new models. And then the data warehouse, which powers a lot of our dashboards and insights that we provide to our customers and healthcare practitioners. So if we go on, I want to talk a little bit about how Starburst and Emiss have worked together to make that happen. We use AWS for our storage. The reason for this is we can guarantee security. We have great auditing and reliability. Obviously, this data is incredibly important that we have durability and security around the data so that we can use the information in the right way at the right time, knowing that it hasn't been tampered with or lost. But critically, different users of the healthcare information have different access patterns and access needs. And so, for example, in the COVID pandemic, we were doing lots of research at scale across the whole UK population, and there's a number of medical papers published on the back of this. But that is done with anonymized data, whereas some of the insight that other researchers might need is from the data that is not anonymized, so they can go and find individuals who need specific help, where anonymity would mean they couldn't reach those patients. And Ranger and Starburst integration with Ranger really helps us here. We can identify the users that are coming to our platform and apply the anonymization to their user at real time, depending on their use case. It obviously needs to be fast. You'll all recall back at the beginning of the pandemic, the world was changing incredibly quickly. The expectation about how it was going to be treated changed. The reasons for locking down and the times for locking down changed quickly. And that data that was driving those insights needed to be up to date and accurate. And so having that really high speed, both ingestion of data and then servicing of that data to our users meant that we can make better decisions in the face of the pandemic. And so this really shows our kind of blueprint for how this works. It has those clinical systems on the left-hand side, the pharmacy and doctors' systems, hitting our data mesh called Explorer in our speak, which has then visualization and data exploration environments on top. If we go on to the next slide, I think we'll talk about addressing healthcare needs at scale.
Yeah, indeed, Richard. Okay, perfect. It's incredible the innovation that you've done as someone who lives in the U.S., I'm incredibly in awe of how much further ahead I think the UK healthcare system is at large, and the role that you've played. And I would love to hear how your innovation has ultimately benefited the healthcare sector in the UK.
Yeah, so one of our customers happily was able to share the use case that they'd used our platform for. And it's kind of interesting because it's COVID impacting, but it's not direct COVID treatment. This was the dashboard that they built on the back of our platform to understand how patients needed to be treated. So when we locked down in the UK, all of a sudden, patients didn't visit GPs anymore. They needed to go instead to get digital consultations via video. Maybe there were some home visits happening still, but people were still unwell for things that weren't COVID. And what this healthcare body did across a number of different practices in their area was identify for each individual patient what their needs would be and how they could be best served in a COVID pandemic where visiting the GP surgery would be really difficult. What this meant for them was that they could treat people that would otherwise have not been able to be treated. And that's an enormous impact to say that your data platform has enabled. And so the visualization, which I think you'll agree is quite pretty in itself, actually is saving lives directly. And I think that's about as rewarding a reason for building a data platform as you can get. But it also shows that there are a number of different ways to use this data to help people. It's not just about directly analyzing the data to treat COVID, but also about analyzing, say, patterns of appointments or the accessibility of people to get to their healthcare professional, all of which can be seen when you bring the different data sources together from appointments, pharmacy, and doctors.
It's incredible. And how do you keep up this pace of innovation at Emiss?
Well, we're in a really fortunate position that our whole business recognizes that healthcare is becoming about data as we go forward into the future. We have, in the UK, been lucky with our NHS standardizing much of how healthcare is provided, that data is similar across a number of different healthcare settings and can be brought together to give you a wider picture. But everything we see for the future of healthcare is about bringing data together, about providing the right insight to the right people at the right time so that they can treat the patient in front of them with the right treatment to make them better.
Tell us more about that. What can we expect? What does the future of healthcare look like?
So there are a number of different pieces that I think we'll start to see as individuals. And actually in the UK, you've started to see this with some of the vaccination programs that the NHS has rolled out. We're doing things like using machine learning and AI to risk score individuals. Now in the past, this has happened for lots of patients, but with very simple models, only assessing very small amounts of the information about patients, whether they smoke, whether they have diabetes, whether they're pregnant, for example. But actually, as we bring more data together and we can get a more rich picture of the patient in a trusted and safe manner, and this is really important, we can start to build better models and find people who maybe were under the radar before, but we can find out what might be underlying causes of illness or potential future illness and treat them before they become either expensive to treat, to keep the costs of the healthcare system down, or beyond effective treatment, which obviously has life-changing effects for the patient. But all of this, and it's important to note this because it can't be done unless we have the highest levels of security and availability. Patients just will not accept there being anything but the most robust standards of both security in terms of technical security, but information governance as well, because really you can't use everybody's data without their permission, so having the ability to opt out and control the security at a patient level is important, but also this data is incredibly sensitive and needs to be secured from attackers.
Absolutely incredible what you've done, Richard. Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening. We do have some time to take some questions if anyone in the audience would like to ask Richard or learn more.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's a great question. I'll just repeat the question so you can all hear. It's about how is there scope for patients having direct access to information about themselves, and what's the scope of that? Actually, patients are starting to get access to their medical record in a way that they haven't in the past, and many of you will have used the NHS app to come in today. That accesses an Emiss system to find out your vaccination status, because we handled all the vaccination records for the UK. And actually, if you use that app, you'll see that you can look at some of your medical record already. You can see medications that you have, appointments can be made through that app, and there's a number of other access to services you can get there. And we, as Emiss, also provide our own app for doing something similar. Now, I think there will be further analytics placed into the hands of the patient for two reasons. One, to get better understanding of the patient's wellness, because wellness is going to be an important thing to manage as we go into the future, but also to try and give them indications of how they can improve their health. So we have been experimenting with an AI model which takes your medication, your medical record, and tells you what your kind of predicted outcome is, like your life expectancy, and allows you to change things about you to say, well, I'll smoke less, what's my predicted life expectancy, or I'll exercise more. And of course, it's an estimate for, or you could almost say it's a meaningless estimate, but it's based on the model. But it does encourage behavioral change. So people, when they say, oh, I can shave off 5 years, or my life expectancy extends 5 years if I don't smoke, then that changes behavior. And that behavioral nudging is going to be something that's important to the healthcare economy going forward. Okay. Oh, there's one
right here in the front. Yeah.
Hello. Hi. I wanted to ask about, obviously, here in the UK, we have the NHS, so all this information in reality should be accessible and free. Do you anticipate in countries where there isn't as robust a socialized medicine that people might have to pay in order to access their own medical records for something like this, with its obviously high demands for security, to be a sustainable model in those countries?
So Emiss is almost entirely a UK-based company, so I'm going to give you my personal view on this rather than a corporate view. It is expensive to provide systems as complex and as robust as this. That's just kind of a given, I guess. But this data is, in most countries, stored in one place or another already. And I think there will be increasingly a business case for those countries to make that data more available to individuals, because it helps drive up data quality, which in the end benefits the healthcare economy if you can see that actually you didn't have this appointment or you're not taking this medication. So I think there will be a widening expanse to users having access to their data. In Europe, I think GDPR is going to drive some of that anyway. I think the access to data is going to be something that people just mandate under law. But the UK is at the front of this. We are very lucky to have such a wide, kind of encompassing healthcare system that allows this data to be stored in this way. So, I think we are leading the world, which is kind of exciting for us.
I'll just add, as someone coming from America, I fully agree. UK is absolutely way ahead when it comes to this. One of the things in the US is the data is legally owned by us as individuals, but there are a whole host of technical challenges and other barriers that make it very difficult to get your data. So even if you go from one doctor and you change to go to another doctor, they don't have access to the data from your previous doctor. You can get that data, but it often means literally printing out your records, getting it in the mail, and bringing it to your new doctor, which does your new doctor now want to read every page of that? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And it's the result of a very fractured system in the US, unfortunately. So you are way ahead. Yes, please.
Thank you. What kind of changes are you seeing in terms of demand from your customer base, from people like the GP and the healthcare community for greater access to this data? Is that being pulled from them, or is it more that you're driving into
Yeah,
this space?
so that's a great question. I don't know if everyone heard that, but what's the pull from the healthcare professionals, basically? There's a big distribution of healthcare professionals, as you can imagine. There are some people who are really technically advanced and they're desperate to do some of their own kind of citizen data science, if you like. And there are others that just want to be told an insight without a prepackaged insight, if you like. The biggest area that we see GPs really want, particularly GPs really want, is help workforce management. So rather than being told how to prescribe a medicine to a patient, which they're experts in, it's how many nurses will I need to cover the winter flu season, or how many mental health professionals do I need in the next 6 months? Because the workforce is under a lot of strain. It's been under a lot of strain for some time. Some medical professionals are leaving the profession because of that kind of high demand. So the analytics there is less about directly providing healthcare and more about managing the way to provide healthcare through resourcing. So that's one of the big areas. The risk stratification piece about identifying which groups of people are at high risk is also an area of demand. So here it will be, for all my 10,000 people in my practice, which ones should I call in for a diabetes screening or something? So getting those lists is quite hard to do manually, but AI and data analysis can do that. So there's a bit of demand for that as well. I think there's one at the back there. Maybe back there.
Hello. Do you think it could be possible to one day foresee future diseases of patients with data that you already have on him? For example, medical history, environment, exercises, and how close are we today to this?
So there is one piece of work that we're doing today, which is on arterial fibrillation, which is a heart defect, which can cause you to have heart attacks. And about 400,000 people a year die of arterial fibrillation in the UK. And you can detect that before the patient exhibits any symptoms. And we have an AI model which is doing that risk stratification I talked about to call people in for screening. And that has been proven, that's been signed off medically. So and it's a neural network as well, and people have said neural networks will never get medical sign-off, and this one has. So that's a big step forward in AI in that space. But it's not diagnosing a condition, it's saying these people are worth further investigation. So do I think we'll be able to do more of that in the future? Absolutely we can. And it really comes back to the whole purpose of this conversation at all. The more data you have, the better, the tighter your risk stratification is, and the more efficient your healthcare professionals can be identifying the potential risk. So I don't think it'll happen. It is happening today, and I think it'll get better.
Very good. Looks like no more questions. I think we're just about out of time anyhow, so thank you all so much for coming. And again, if you'd like to learn more about Emiss or Starburst, please stop by our booth, number 414, way on the other side. Thanks again.